The cabin lights had dimmed into that soft, conspiratorial glow airlines used to calm nerves and nudge strangers towards sleep. I had my elbow on the armrest, a paperback folded face down on my lap, and a coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. Everyone else had retreated into screens or sleep masks. The hum of the engines a steady, dependable vibration beneath our conversation-less lives. Across the aisle, a woman in a crisp blouse and a designer scarf had made herself the center of attention without saying a word. She had the kind of smile that suggested she expected life to line up exactly where she wanted it to, right down to the seatbelt light. When she turned to her companion, her gaze swept the cabin like a critic scanning a gallery and landed on me with something close to distaste. "People like you shouldn't be in first class," she said loud enough for the immediate rows to hear. The words were a scalpel, clean and deliberate, meant to cut. There was a ripple of awkwardness. Looks drifted toward us like curious birds. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the old reflex to reply sharpening in my tongue. For a moment, I considered answering with the kind of line that would inflame the moment. Something curt, something that would show her she had misread the room. Then I remembered the badge hidden under my jacket and the quiet training that taught me to let provocation float past like debris on water. I let the sentence hang between us instead of letting it become a battle. The woman's companion laughed, embarrassed and quick, as if to apologize for the interruption, and the woman leaned back, satisfied. Her disdain had landed and lodged, and that was that. Except we were still in the air with 2 hours of time and nowhere to hide from each other. She kept glancing my way, eyes sliding over like fingers looking for texture. When the flight attendant came by with the snack cart, the woman leaned forward and, with a theatrical sigh, told the attendant she wanted a different seatmate. "I'm paying to be comfortable," she declared. "People who are loud or rude should be moved." The attendant, young and polite, offered standard reassurances about reassignment and apologies, but the woman's tone suggested she wanted more than comfort. She wanted confirmation that the rest of the world should fold to the shape of her convenience. People look for allies in public settings. A few passengers nodded slightly, a resigned sort of agreement that seemed to say they too had been inconvenienced by strangers' existence. But not everyone. An elderly man in a nearby row, a schoolteacher by the look of his cardigan and the way he adjusted his glasses, whispered to his wife about manners and decency. A mother tried, unsuccessfully, to extract a toddler from under a blanket without drawing attention. Life kept happening in small, stubborn ways, indifferent to the woman's pronouncements. Her voice rose again, this time directed at me with a new-edged confidence. "You know, some people shouldn't take spaces meant for others," she said. "It's disrespectful." Heads turned like rain on an umbrella. My initial impulse, longing for a debate, a public unmasking, wiggled under my composure. But the world had taught me that escalation rarely yields the satisfying moral victory you imagine. More often, it frays things and stains the memory. So I did something different. I closed my book, I folded my hands, and I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Silence has a way of magnifying the absurd. When she saw that I wasn't going to rise to the bait, the woman seemed to tighten, as if she had expected my outrage to be a live wire she could tug. Her lips pursed, but her companion, eyes darting between us, suddenly stiffened. He had been watching with a smirk, the private amusement of an accomplice, but something in the air shifted. "Sir," the flight attendant asked, gentle and slightly formal. "Is everything okay over here?" She had that neutral tone, the kind that treats turbulence and temper the same. An even cadence meant to briefly flatten the spike of conflict. I nodded and offered a small, calm answer. "Everything's fine." The attendant accepted it and moved on, but the woman wasn't satisfied. She leaned forward and said, louder now and with a theatrical impatience, "Show me your ticket. I want to see where you're sitting." That was the moment people around us realized this wasn't about comfort, it was about power. Asking for my ticket was less an inquiry than a demand for verification, a test of belonging. I could have handed it over. I could have snipped back with sarcasm and made her the story of the flight. But those reactions would have fed the spectacle she wanted to create. Instead, I reached into my jacket, not to show my ticket, but to keep my movements unremarkable. I kept my posture casual, my voice soft. "There's really no need," I said. "I'm comfortable." The woman wasn't used to being defied with gentleness. She recovered with a laugh, brittle and forced, and said, "If you're so comfortable, then move somewhere else. This is first class." There, in that sentence, was everything. Entitlement wrapped in moral righteousness, a belief that public spaces are the mirror of her self-worth. A murmur threaded through the cabin. A young man by the window huffed and turned his attention away, the sort of performative neutrality people practice to avoid messy involvement. To his credit, another passenger, a woman with tired eyes and a paperback, sleeping now, shifted in her seat and glared. The cabin's attention became a low hum, a community of witnesses. When people watch, muscles that were relaxed tighten, ready to act or to shrug, and that's when small moments often become big ones. I had been trained for tight spaces and long hours, for conversations that had to be steered with few words and steady hands. My job, the one etched into the bone from years of work and 100 quiet decisions, was to remain unseen until being seen mattered. That afternoon, the badge was a secret that mattered. I thought of the faces in the cabin, the family returning from a funeral, a young couple clasping hands under a blanket, a man with a guitar case in the overhead bin. They were everyone's business and no one's, a scattering of lives that deserved to unfold without spectacle. The woman's escalation stuttered into something else, a demand for action. "He should be moved," she said to the flight attendant. "I paid for this class. This is ridiculous." The flight attendant looked like someone who had practiced patience as a profession. "Ma'am, we can look into changing seats if there's a problem," she replied. "But I'd like to understand exactly what the issue is." And there it was, an opening. "He's rude and doesn't belong here," the woman insisted, as if incantation might make it true. Her words were an attempt to construct a legal case out of discomfort. The crew's approach was procedural, professional. They asked me if I wanted to switch seats, and for a second the expected script flickered through my mind. Explain, apologize, defuse. But my training reminded me of a different script, one not for calming the entitled, but for protecting the many. "There's no need to move me," I said. My voice was low enough to keep the scene from turning into a spectacle. "I'm fine." That answer didn't satisfy. She raised her voice again, and the man who had been her companion started recording with his phone, a halo of smartphone light and the promise of an audience. Social media would reward this. Clips would be uploaded, captions written, outrage monetized. The woman preened, pleased by the idea of being on the stage she had created. It might have been a simple case of class posturing if the woman hadn't begun to center her comments on who she thought I was. Complete assumptions about my life, my job, my worth. "I don't want my children seeing people like you in my family's seats," she said, cruel and loud. The phrase sliced the cabin in two. Beneath the words lay a long history of exclusion, unstated but heavy. A child in a nearby row, no older than 7, watched a TV screen and didn't look up. But the adults felt the sting. That line was a line too far. It wasn't about luxury anymore. It was about identity and humiliation. On instinct, the flight attendant called ahead, a small radio click becoming part of the background of the plane. Someone on the crew's side would check our paperwork, observe, and report. The woman, emboldened by her own righteousness, kept talking, shaping the narrative for whoever would watch the video she'd been promised. I could have addressed her directly, pulling the facts into the light. I could have taken off my jacket and shown a badge. I could have revealed myself in a way that would burn her indignation into history with a single, swift motion. But training teaches restraint. There are moments when revealing is necessary, and there are moments when it fractures the trust you want to preserve. Instead, I watched the woman unravel the social fabric of the cabin with her words, and I decided to steer the outcome without spectacle. When the senior flight attendant returned, she asked questions quietly, professionally. She checked our boarding passes, confirming seats, names, and ticket numbers, as is their duty. Everything checked out. The woman, sensing that procedure might not land on her side, shifted to a different tactic, accusation dressed as concern. "He looked threatening," she said, which was a curious choice since she had been the one raising her voice. It was then that I decided to act, not to feed the camera or to humiliate, but to restore calm and dignity to the people who'd been drawn into the scene. "Ma'am," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to lower your voice and stop making comments about other passengers. If there's a problem, we will handle it professionally." That line had weight because it wasn't a claim of authority shouted into the cabin. It was a measured direction. The woman flinched, bewildered that her attempts at dominance were being met not with spectacle, but with quiet control. "You can't tell me what to do," she snapped. "I'm a paying customer." "Being a paying customer doesn't give you license to harass others," I replied. "Please lower your voice for everyone's comfort." Her companion's recording slowed as his attention shifted. The young man who had smirked earlier looked suddenly less certain. The cabin's mood tilted. The crew's presence, calm and procedural, made it clear this wasn't merely a personal scuffle. I kept speaking in short, clear sentences, instructing the woman to stop and the crew to follow protocol if she didn't. I wasn't there to punish. I was there to prevent escalation. The woman pushed back, louder and shriller, and for a terrifying second I could see how quickly words could become dangerous. But the map of the moment had changed, a seasoned crew, aware passengers, and a quiet authority at the center. The woman, realizing she had lost the immediate audience sympathy she had courted, softened a fraction. People who only wanted validation from an audience found the stage thinning, and audiences retreat quickly when prompted by steady leadership. Eventually, the crew offered the woman an alternative, either to accept a drink, to move a row back for her comfort, or to speak privately with a supervisor when we landed. She hissed and chose the promise of future complaint over the balm of the present. She sat down, folding her arms like a gusted flag, and her companion kept his phone clipped to his grip, though the live stream's momentum had dwindled. When the cabin settled back into its diffused chatter and headphones, a woman near the back leaned forward and said simply, "Thank you." Many heads nodded. A few offered small smiles. It wasn't a parade. It was an acknowledgement that someone had reminded the plane of a basic courtesy. Being human in public means making room for others to exist without being judged. Later, when we were closer to landing and the routine announcements stitched the cabin into its final rhythm, the captain's voice came over the speaker with the usual calm. I watched passengers gather their belongings in sequences that made sense only to them. A man crumpling a newspaper, a teenage girl sorting earbuds, a mother wrestling a car seat into its protective embrace. There was an invisible economy of small kindnesses being repaid with nods and returned blankets. On the ground, the woman walked off with a practiced indignation, as if she had been wronged by the entire universe. Her companion hung back, phone tucked away, his smile gone. People filed past without pointing, some throwing quick comments under breath that were kinder than the event had deserved. A little boy looked up at the flight attendant and waved, and the attendant waved back with a tired, genuine smile that said more than any viral clip ever could. As for me, I stepped into the sunlight and into the ordinary anonymity of the airport. Someone asked for directions. I pointed. A stranger thanked me for helping her retrieve a dropped boarding pass. The day went on, and the story folded into the small, human archive of moments that make up a life. The woman's words had been sharp, but they had not changed the fact that the majority of people in that plane had chosen decency over spectacle. There are days when being visible is necessary, when a badge must be revealed and force must be used to protect. There are other days when quiet action, that steady, unflashy insistence on procedure and dignity, does more to repair what had been torn. My job had been to notice and to act in a way that minimized harm and maximized dignity. In that cramped cabin, I did just that. Sometimes the greatest authority is not announced with a badge and a shout, but demonstrated by calm, measured intervention. The world doesn't need more performances of righteousness. It needs people who will hold the line when others try to pull it apart. That afternoon, I chose the line. The plane landed. People reunited and left to whatever lives waited beyond the terminal. The woman became another passenger in the sea of faces, and the story of her indignation dissolved into 1,000 quieter acts of decency that, cumulatively, keep us moving forward.